In this lesson, we learn about how loops are used in coding. Computers are incredibly fast and accurate, so they're really good at repeating a process or doing the same thing over and over again. When a computer program is designed to repeat something, we refer to that as a loop. In Scratch, in the control category, you see that we've got three different types of loops. We've got the repeat, and then a number loop. We've got the forever loop, and down here we've got repeat until. The forever loop means the program will never stop repeating those functions. This can be useful, but not very interesting to discuss, so let's take a look at the repeat function that's right above it, where it says repeat 10. It allows us to specify how many times we want the repeat to happen. The default is 10, but you can put any number you want in there. So supposing we wanted a program that would simply count from 2 up to 20 by 2. So we want it to go 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and so on. So we realize we want to do that 10 times, so I'm going to drag out the repeat 10 times. But what do I want it to do? Well, I want it to start at 2 and count up from there. So I need some kind of a counter to keep track of the value that I'm working on. So that sounds like a job for variables that we learned about previously. I'm going to use just the default variable that's automatically set up with the system. I'm going to drag that out, and I'm going to say set my variable. In this case, I'm going to set my variable to 2 because that's what I'm going to be, that's where I'm going to be starting, and that's what I'm counting by. Now, if I went up and go to my looks, and I'm going to ask it to say, and this time I'm going to tell it to say my variable. So I'm going to drag out the variable bubble, and rather than 2 seconds, I'm just going to leave it at 1 second so it doesn't take quite as long. If I go ahead and run that program, let's see what it does. Clicks run, it says 2, but it doesn't do anything else. It's repeating this process 10 times, but all that process says to do is to just say my variable, which is 2. So it's always going to keep saying 2. So what I needed to do is start off by saying 2, but then add 2 to that and keep doing that. So in order to do that, I want to change my variable after it displays it. So I'm going to go ahead and change my variable by the amount 2. And if I go ahead and run it now, let's see what happens. You can see now that it's counting up by 2s, and it should stop when it gets to 20. And it does. So that's interesting that we can now use the repeat process and we can specify how many times it repeats a process. But what makes it even more powerful is that we can control how many times it repeats. So we might ask the user for a specific number and then fill that variable in there. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and use the ask function. I'm going to drop that in at the start and say, how many times to repeat? Question. And we know that we're going to get an answer back from that. So in this case, rather than repeating 10 times, I'm going to say, I want to repeat just as many times as the user asks me to. So now when I run the program, it's going to come up and prompt me. If I say 3 and press enter, it's going to say 2, 4, 6. So it showed me 3 numbers, and then it stopped. So this is where the power of loops really comes into play. By being able to use variables in place of the repeat counter, you can then start defining the number of times a program repeats becomes very flexible and very dynamic. So that's the simplest use of a loop in coding.